Well, here's a clue. Purple is a fall color. It's the middle of May.
Pardon?
So this is my sleeping arrangement. It's absolutely disgusting. Don't tell my mom. But I'm in the middle of doing a really big wardrobe audit. It has occurred to me several times that I own way too many things and I'm not really wearing the majority of my closet. And now that the temperatures are dramatically dropping, which is such a nice thing to do a couple of days before my birthday, right? I do want to sort of just go through everything I have and start looking at like what I'm wearing more often, what I'm not wearing, what I could be utilizing more, start planning how to layer things for the winter seasons and stuff. And also just trying to make sure that I'm having the most like sustainable approach to my own wardrobe. So like before this giant pile already, I sorted through everything I had and I divided everything into piles of stuff that I wanted to keep, things I wanted to donate, and stuff I wanted to like give away to my friends. And then I also have like some piles for things that need mending and altering, or maybe just a complete like thrift, flip, upcycle project, etc. And then this is stuff that I just need to actually eventually get to packing away. But as I was doing this, it's gotten me thinking about finding more effective ways of organizing my wardrobe. And that has led me down the very wild path of seasonal color analysis. Seasonal color analysis was one of those things I read about in magazines as a kid that I knew was solely for white women. Like, the hell do you mean I'm an autumn Brenda? But recently it has had this really huge resurgence, especially on TikTok, as you see a lot of young people trying to figure out their personal style and how to find things that are flattering for them and discover their unique color palettes using things like AI technology, social media filters, and some people are even dropping racks on specialty consultations where like a lady drapes a bunch of like cloths under your chin and figures out your exact coloring. Like, what do you guys think? But if you look at the majority of the widely available and accessible information, because I'm not going to spend money on this, that sounds absolutely ridiculous to me, you will realize that the majority of seasonal color analysis is overwhelmingly white, or at least like a lot of the examples and the references are often just concerning white women. And for the blessed few of us that are not terminally online and addicted to our phones, I'm just going to give a quick breakdown of seasonal color analysis, which is a system that uses a person's eye, hair, and skin coloring to formulate an individual color palette. And it's basically based on your undertones, the contrast between all your features, you know, light versus dark, and very basic color theory. And from there, people get assigned to one of the 4 seasons: summer, winter, autumn, or spring. And that can further be broken down into like bright spring or deep autumn or true winter. The idea is to come up with a set of colors that fit into these sort of seasons, whether they're like warm or cool or bright or dark, that complement your skin tone and your features in terms of the coloring. Typically, your summers and winters have cool undertones, with, again, typically summers having light hair and light eyes, winters having dark hair and dark eyes. Springs and autumns have warm undertones, with springs having light hair and light eyes, and autumns typically having dark hair and dark eyes. So you might notice that since we're grouping people sort of by dark hair, dark eyes versus light hair, light eyes, that there is a large group of people who almost generally tend to always kind of have dark hair and dark eyes. So I'm not super willing to give a lot of merit to a system that's going to kind of generalize most black and brown people as either being autumns and winters. And especially since a lot of the early resources tend to describe most black people as just all winters. Like, you can see this chart I found where pretty much all of the dark-skinned people are winters, which doesn't make sense to me considering how many black women I've seen look absolutely phenomenal in a autumn color palette, so your browns and yellows, and also the fact that I've seen like deep dark women looking amazing in like these like pastels and like stark whites, as well as your more like bright spring palettes, I guess. But it does of course all make sense because this was a system first developed only with white people in mind. Clap if you're surprised. Damn, and it's quiet. In the late 70s and 80s, Bernice Kittner and Carol Jackson each published books on these color palette systems, basically bringing seasonal color analysis to the fore. And they basically went whatever the 20th century equivalent of going viral was. And it goes without saying that both of these women were white, and imagining the seasons according to the very, very many diverse and intricate shades and hues of other white people. You know, you get like redheads and brunettes and blondes and tan people and pale people, and yeah. But that's not to bag on white people. It does kind of make sense for them and stuff. And I'm not angry at someone coming up with a system for people just like them. But again, it's kind of limiting if you're black. And I do have a few suspicions as to why seasonal color analysis got a lot of popularity come the 90s and 2000s, which I will get to later. But with its revival right now, we have at least been able to witness content creators and even companies specializing in adapting the system to people of color, which I think is really cool, because I really like the concept of seasonal color analysis, especially as I think it could be a really great tool in helping people like find their personal style and also build a more sustainable wardrobe and lifestyle. I think the biggest cause of our culture's fashion waste and overconsumption is that we're often just making the wrong choices when we shop and dress. And I don't mean wrong like you don't know how to figure out what's good for you, or you don't understand how to dress well, because also that, again, so subjective, and I myself don't like to subscribe to ideas of dressing well. But I mean wrong in that the majority of the stuff that we buy online is presented on an idealized, sometimes even AI generated body, and after we get over the high of making a new purchase, we're left with the uncomfortable reality that we're not going to look like a fabricated image online. It often also feels like the mirrors and the lighting in dressing rooms conspire to make us see versions of ourselves in these new clothes that are so divorced from the reality of when we actually have to wear them in our daily lives. It's a sort of big contrast for the excitement of getting this new item or investing in this new trend, but then actually having to live in it every day and realizing that it's not flattering, it doesn't look good to you. And then you also add to that the majority of modern clothing just doesn't fit. It's all either extremely baggy and loose fitting, or it's some sort of stretchy knit spandex elastane tube, and then we're made to feel like the fact that we don't look good in what is essentially just a rectangle piece of fabric is a personal failing as a result of our own unattractiveness, our own inability to put items together, instead of the result of poor construction, fit and design. And I have obviously discussed earlier how a lot of like modern clothing is engineered for surgery enhanced bodies, is engineered for being on a screen, is engineered for Facetune and stuff. And of course, also we're constantly sold this idea from advertisers, from influencers, from mass media, that if we just buy this one thing, get into this one specific trend, achieve this luxury bag, we'll finally find fulfillment, desire, and belonging. But then that itchy, stretched out polyester crop top arrives, made from slave labor, of course, and it can never live up to all of those expectations, because fulfillment and acceptance and belonging aren't things you necessarily achieve through consumption. And at the end of the day, you're left to just confront all the things you don't like about yourself by yourself, and there's no amount of buying that's going to fix that. But all of that's just to say that I think at least being able to figure out what colors look best on you, what brings out your undertones, what makes your eyes pop, you know, what really accentuates your features and will get you the most compliments, can go a really long way to ensuring that you're not only buying stuff you actually like and want to wear, but you're more inclined to want to keep those things. You're going to take better care of them and then actually like wear them in your daily life. You know, like I heard a stat the other day, don't quote me on this might be misinformation, but it was that like most of us actually only wear something like 20% of the stuff in our wardrobes. And having been going through my wardrobe recently, I can attest to this fact. There are so many things I didn't realize I hadn't worn in like months, maybe even years, even though in my head I'm like, I love this item, I'm really attached to this, but like, when was the last time I wore this? Like, I really don't know. And I mean, part of the reason we're not wearing as much of the things we own is because of the overwhelming amount of things that we own, and it's just kind of hard for the human brain to wrap your mind around the sheer volume of stuff. But I also think the other thing is the fact that like we're not buying things that we actually like beyond the initial like first purchase, the first acquisition, or once we've popped that fit off for Instagram. So as I was researching seasonal color analysis, thinking of it as this possible like cure-all to fast fashion addiction, overconsumption, I was watching several videos. I even tried out this TikTok filter, and then I also tried out an AI image scanner. And actually, most of the information I was getting kind of revealed that I was a winter, which again, I have a problem with just because like it can't be that all dark skinned people are winters, but that's fine. But then I asked some of my friends to test out the same AI image scanner, and it was a little bit weird. I wouldn't really trust it because out of a group of light-skinned, dark-skinned black women, an Asian woman, and a white woman, all of us in just very many different shades and undertones, we all turned out to be winters. But doing all of this stuff and trying out all these little tests and quizzes and using the AI stuff, it did hit me that a lot of this felt like taking a personality test. Like I was getting that same high, that same thrill from doing like the Myers-Briggs, from making my birth chart, or like taking one of those BuzzFeed quizzes that tell you which Disney princess you are based on your favorite pizza topping. I never get Aurora like I want. It's basically this weird fascination and like joy we take in having someone or something tell us exactly who we are, to reveal all this like secret information about our inner selves and our personal lives, and come up with this, you know, defined, specially tailored, accurate description of us for us. And what was most interesting, and something that I also noticed amongst other people doing these seasonal color analyses, was how much it like really upset me when I was getting results I didn't agree with. Like I was really attached to the idea of being a summer, even though I was getting winter a lot. But a lot of that might have to do with the fact that like summer color palettes are just more in line with my personal color preferences, as you can see. And also it's just really hard to judge yourself by yourself for yourself. And I think that's part of the appeal of like having someone tell you that you're an ENFP or you're a Pisces rising. Those are all things I am, by the way. And again, also I do also have this like kind of silly belief that I don't really think color analysis really applies to black people, but because like I think black people look good in everything. Like if there's one thing I remember from high school art, it's that brown is kind of a universal color, and that it kind of goes with everything. And even when I look at these like side-by-side examples of like black women, which are meant to show why someone is technically an autumn, or why someone's an a summer, or you know how someone is deep dark or soft cool or whatever, I cannot for the life of me really see the difference. Like I can agree that there are generally certain colors that work better with certain skin tones or certain like palettes, but in general I think by and large for most black people I think almost everything works. And I think maybe we can discuss that there are like certain shades themselves that are just kind of unappealing or unattractive. I famously I hate the color green. I think it's gross, which is probably why I haven't worn that top in a while. But again, I just really find it difficult to see what doesn't work against black skin. And it's like, yeah, maybe I'm not knowledgeable, or maybe I haven't trained my eye, but I can definitely see what a redhead or a ginger person means by being washed out by pink, or when someone says that like a jewel tone is drowning them out. But I just not clicking when it comes to black people for me. And again, that's probably personal bias, which is also another thing I'm just kind of noticing with this like seasonal color analysis stuff. It's this attempt to apply science to fashion, which is a field that just really doesn't really ascribe to scientific methods in that way. A lot of this is so personal. A lot of this is so much based on preference. When it comes to something like color and personality and personal style, it's always so subjective in case to case, and it is really difficult to come up with these like wide rules that fit everyone. And it just has started making me think about like the idea or the attraction that a lot of us have to trying to come up with these categories, with these labels, with trying to box in ourselves. And I know that I'm not like alone in this, because again, like a lot of the people I've seen online doing these color consultations or reassessing their palettes also often don't agree with their own findings. And just like I did, they also got really upset when they got color palettes they didn't agree with, because again, I think color is also very personal, and a lot of us have very like sentimental attachments to certain colors. And that's part of the reason why we're drawn to purchasing certain colors and wearing certain colors most often. And it's just interesting that even though we're going to feel like some of these things are wrong, we still give a lot of weight to these tell me who I am tests. Like, ooh, I don't even want to imagine how many people are throwing out a bunch of clothes because some color specialist told them they're actually in autumn when they've always felt like a spring. But I would like to imagine that people are taking these tests and these analyses as like a guide or as a little clarification, and not like Bible, not as doctrine, and not like getting rid of a bunch of stuff that they used to like. And it's just gotten me thinking about also just this general obsession with personality tests and fashion archetypes and body types and style essences, which obviously isn't a new development. Like, remember earlier when I said I had some ideas about why color analysis fell out of popularity? Well, here's my little crackpot theory that I'm coming up with right now. I think that because a lot of fashion in the 20th century was about fitting into these very prescribed, very set in stone, well-defined labels, and it was also a time where conforming to the group was a certain standard, where that was actually what you did. Like, you didn't really break convention. That wasn't a normal thing. No one actually set out to be like a style rebel. Even if you belonged to some sort of like edgy subculture or counterculture, there were still rules of how you should look and act in order to fit into those groups. So whether you were like punk or goth or rockabilly or Lolita or a beatnik or into streetwear, it was understood that along with dressing a certain way, you also had to listen to certain types of music, you had to frequent certain places, you shopped in specific places, you supported certain brands, and you hung out with certain people and you spoke a certain way. So even if you were out of the mainstream, you still had to conform to whatever was typical or whatever was accepted in your particular group, subculture, clique. It's why we used to speak so much of the like typical Chanel woman or the Dior girl. Your identity was very closely tied to the things you bought, to what you consumed. You would find your tribe, your group, your people, not through language and religion in the traditional sense, but like in how you belted your skirts, in the kind of perfume you wore, how you would decorate your bedroom. But then like the 90s happened, and with it globalization, fast fashion, and of course the internet, amen, and this larger, diverse, more spread out, varied world. So people starting to mix and match more often because there was just this frequent cultural clash, cultural exchange. So like now you might wear Italian designer shoes with baggy thrifted jeans, or you might see punk fashion at a Louis Vuitton show. I think like Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City best embodies this, this sort of mix of everything. It's high, it's low. It's like you might listen to a lot of angry rock music, but you like to wear pretty bows and flowers in your hair. Everyone is just an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. You wear 1,000 different cultures and ideas on your body all at once. And it just wasn't fashionable to box people into these singular, well-defined labels anymore. It just didn't fit with this new world view. And I think that's why then that normcore and minimalism was so big after the recession, because there was so much difference and idiosyncrasy. You could kind of find refuge and solace in just like looking normal and average and ordinary, because it was already understood that your clothing style wasn't directly indicative of your beliefs, lifestyle, and behavior. Like you wearing a golf shirt and like plain jeans didn't really mean you listen to like generic pop music. You could have a complex inner world, and it wasn't related to how you dress. But because there also was so many complex and complicated images constantly zooming past you thanks to the internet, I think everything also started to lose its uniqueness at the same time, and its specialness. So we also started to celebrate the idea of being plain and simple more and more, just because everything around us was so maximalist, so complicated, so too much. We started to take refuge in just these like pared down aesthetics. And it's very much human nature to want to be both an individual and be part of a group. And I think this is why Gen Z has brought back not only seasonal color analysis, but this obsession with labels and cores and aesthetics and these like strictly defined subgroups and subcategories and all this typing like you would have seen in the 20th century. And I just read somewhere that like Gen Z is defined as people aged 12 to 25. And as someone turning 25 in a few days, I'm actually absolutely heartbroken at the thought of being a really old Zoomer as opposed to like the fresh young baby millennial I felt like I've always been my whole life. It's the kind of shift I haven't prepared for, honestly. And the fact that like I'm gonna move out of that 18 to 24 demographic and no one's gonna market to me anymore. Is it gonna be radio silence from here on? But anyways, again, here I go putting a lot of weight and investment into labels. And it's so funny because I think of that one Tommy Lauren clip where she's like,
millennial, so I don't really like labels.
and that kind of like summarizes the whole thing. I think millennials, more than any other generation before them, had to deal with constantly being labeled, categorized, pathologized, and diagnosed by marketers, politicians, their parents, and just the world at large. And since a lot of these labels like narcissistic, vain, sore losers, everyone gets a prize, the people who killed the diamond industry because they can't stop making avocado toast, these labels were generally really negative and restrictive and cliched and unwilling to see their many facets of the very different sides of their personalities and who they were. I think that's why you see that millennials turned so much to things like astrology, to Myers-Briggs tests, and to try and find other labels or groupings or assessments that actually recognize them as individuals, not so much these broad groups that everyone could paint with these big oversweeping traits and characteristics that they often really felt like they disagreed with or that were put upon them. They offered a way to make their own narratives while also being able to find communities and groups with like-minded people struggling with the same issue of having all of these ideas placed upon you, but still not being able to see or define who you are from these external factors. And I think that issue is even more magnified for Gen Z. It just seems like media and marketing are so invested in trying to pin down this generation, type them and box them ultimately so that they can sell to them better, while also like mocking them and insulting them the same way they did their predecessors. And the other day I read, I think it was a Day's article about Generation Alpha, and I'm just like, just leave people alone for 5 seconds. But again, that's why I think Gen Z labels especially are so incredibly niche and ridiculously specific in a way we've never really seen before. Like 90s whimsy goth, coastal grandma, coconut girl, e-boy, bloke core, dark academia, light academia, coquette, cottage core, health goth, cyber ghetto, so on and so on. These labels are so absolutely unique, and it seems like every day people keep trying to mash the most disconnected words together to define some new, never before seen aesthetic. And I think people are creating these labels to help set themselves apart from the group. We live with so much images and so much information more than ever before, and I think these micro trends and aesthetics allow us the opportunity to carve out our own space from the mainstream, to find this still point in the spinning rock. There's just so much happening all at once all the time, and there's so much noise online that it's really hard to try and break through that and figure out the things that you actually like, the things that are specific to you, especially because you're just constantly sold so much. So I think that's why you see people retreating more and more into these very niche, very specialized aesthetics and personal brands and, the cause as you will have it. But it's also at the same time how people are finding community, how you're trying to connect with people just like you. When you see something really unique and different online, having these little labels does make it easier to search for more creators or people, and also I guess importantly brands and shops. It's now our tribes again aren't really based on language and belief in the traditional sense, but whatever works best for a social media algorithm, which has its good sides and its very bad sides. I think as more and more of these micro trends develop, and because there are so many that they have to keep getting more niche and specific each time in order to stand out, we're actually approaching a post-trend world. Because there are so many trends, there are no trends at all. I don't think the 2020s have a singular defining look or trend, or a macro trend in the way that the 2000s or the 80s did. And that's probably why I think Zoomers love referencing the past so much. Vintage fashion is simple and straightforward. You know what a 50s look is. You know what a 70s look is. 2020s fashion is a minefield of codes, hashtags, and references that reference memes, that reference past trends, that reference other references that are all based on another reference. And it's so complicated to wade through that information to figure out like the core or the essence of something. So I see in this desire to find a seasonal color palette a simple list of this is who you are, this is what works for you, and this is what you should avoid can be so appealing. And obviously because I'm an insufferable tree hugger, I think it's also important to note that this post-trend world isn't currently heading towards a personal style utopia, as I think a lot of people like to hope, where it's like everyone shops and dresses really mindfully and consciously, where they find a set uniform and they stick to it, where they can invest in the things they own, not only in terms of like buying things that are of better material, better quality construction, made under ethical conditions, but also that they're going to take care of those items and they're gonna, extend the lifespans of those things, and that they don't need to find validation and affirmation in every new viral trend. Instead, I feel like this post-trend world is just kind of making us consume so much more. Like, it's never been this affordable in the history of ever to buy clothing, thanks to all the labor violations and environmental pollution and what have you, which means that there aren't really any limits to how many ways and how many times you can experiment with fashion until you do find that personal style that's just super personal. And I feel like we're also all rewarded for coming up with these fresh new combinations all the time, to keep coming up with all of these labels and terms so that they can be put into search bars, and so that like companies can be able to sell people stuff, so that people can have the kind of things that no one else has, or be able to wear stuff in a way that no one else has been able to do. And again, it's just, you have to keep accumulating tons and tons of things until you get this formula right. And I'm not really against like experimenting with fashion, but again, there's a very wasteful element, because there's going to be a lot of failures on the way, and it's like, what do you do with all those things that don't work for you once you figured out the right thing? But I guess that's another problem. I guess my main thing is that we are kind of just dressing for our screens a lot more with these micro trends, and not actually making enough considerations to the ways we actually have to live in those clothes. Like, I really love this idea of trying to push personal style and individual taste, but I don't feel like what's being sold to us is also taking into consideration cost to people and planet, taking into consideration cultural sustainability, the ways we actually have to live and engage in these things. And it feels like what's being sold as individuality and personal style is just the same consumerism and materialism that we've had for years, just really repackaged in a nicer way. And I guess this has been a very long, roundabout way of saying that I still don't think I'm a winter. By the way, I swear to God, please do not tell my mom this is what my room looks like. Initially I started like grouping everything here by like warm and cool, and then I was like trying to see like, does that work? But then I kind of realized I don't actually care. I like the colors I like, and I'm gonna keep wearing them anyway. But I think for people who feel like lost or don't know where to start, it's a really good starting point. And that might be you. Anyway, this is the end of the video. So let me know what you think, if you've tried seasonal color analysis, if you think there are other sort of like grouping typing systems that can help people like actually find personal style in a way that's also not just encouraging spending money on things you don't need, or overconsumption, or having to like redo your entire wardrobe. Again, as always, I'm gonna do my plugs. I have a newsletter called Hanger Management. You can sign up to that. Oh my God, my birthday's in a couple of days. You should wish me happy birthday. Maybe send me money if you feel kind of sexy. If you're really hot and cool, you might do it. I have a buy me a coffee. That'll probably be linked down below. I've got a bunch of resources in the description as always. And that's that. I need to get back to trying to figuring out my winter wardrobe and how I'm gonna upcycle a bunch of items. And what am I gonna do about all my socks that are all by themselves?